Thank you so much, Tim. So next slide. So I'm going to be talking today about GIS 1 here at UO. And I'm going to give you some general context around this class and some overview about online teaching here at our university, and talking about the lecture portion of the class. Nate's going to finish up the presentation by talking about the labs. So this class, GIS 1, is Geography 481, 581. It's typically a 200 or 300 level course at most universities. And but here it's a 400 level course because that allows graduate students to take it. We teach ArcGIS Pro through around 7 lab assignments, and the lectures focus on concepts, not on software. Next slide. So this class serves lots of students and needs. There's about 200 students a year that take this class. It's a requirement for geography and spatial data science majors. Those are majors within our department. We also serve environmental science, which is a huge major on our campus, and nearly 24 other majors. It's not a gen ed, by the way, but it serves lots of undergrads, many grad students across campus, as well as in our department, and even faculty have taken my class. It's taught every term. We're on the quarter system, so that means fall, winter, spring, and summer. We teach about 65 students a term and about 20 in the summer. I teach it 2 times a year with 2 full-time graduate assistants in the classroom, and then I have 2 additional lab assistants that help out. Next slide. So I just want to give you a bit of background about online learning here at UO. We don't have a lot of online classes here. From what I understand, UO kind of took a back seat to Oregon State, which is just 45 minutes up the road from us, and they provide a lot of online learning at their university. This is really contrasted for me and my experience teaching online classes at both Penn State, where I completely revamped online courses as a graduate student, and Michigan State, where I was a master's student and taught a huge online course as a sole instructor over the summer. At UO, I didn't teach this past spring term in terms of COVID, so I kind of thought I had won the lottery. Obviously, that was a bit short-sighted. Unlike other schools, we're already in a budget crisis before COVID, and we even get the terrible trophy of being the first university in the United States to lay off staff. We laid off about 300 people who work in food services and housing back in April, just a few months after the thing started to shut down. In May, everyone in the UO community was told that we would come back for in-person classes in the fall. This was changed in late August at UO because we saw how semester schools were doing, and we went almost fully online for this fall. Next slide. So as I'm sure most educators encountered this push for synchronous learning. That's classes that meet on Zoom. Students can interact with professors in kind of a synchronous fashion, because we really wanted to meet the needs of our typical in-person students. So these are students who normally live on campus or just off campus, and they really want kind of that to be reproduced online. Here at UO, asynchronous courses need approval. Synchronous courses are really the norm and the plan. We do have things like learning designers. These are people who kind of help you out, although the night and day difference really between here and my previous experience at both Penn State and Michigan State is just drastic. Really, you only get somebody to help you if you've gone through the approval process. Interestingly, I had gotten approval from my department in January before COVID to hire a graduate student who was supposed to work with me in the spring. A lot of money dried up, and now I'm kind of forced to do this without the support that I had kind of previously been approved for. Next slide. So from the planning of this course, it felt like I was teaching doubly kind of what I normally do. I'm sure that a lot of academics could really relate to that. I can't require attendance, so that means while there's this want for synchronous delivery, students actually need an asynchronous course. I'm in the process of getting approval to teach this asynchronously starting next term, so that's winter 2021. Because of this, I'm working towards that asynchronous plan by running this course in fall 2020 as a flipped classroom. Currently, everything is asynchronous except for our Zoom times where we do in-class activities. There we primarily spend time in breakout rooms on Zoom. Students are required to watch videos before they get there, and then I can float around to different breakout rooms and check in on students. This has had moderate success. The most successful ones I owe to Nathaniel for helping me think of ways to do this. And we do things like use Google Docs and Google Sheets, and I get to see what they're doing and comment on it when we get back into the main room and end the breakout rooms. So on the left-hand side of here is kind of what I used to do, and then what now I'm kind of forced into doing with the plan that this will be fully asynchronous by next year. So I used to give 2 big exams. Now those are 10 weekly quizzes. I used to have around 20, 30 to 45-minute lectures with some in-class activities. Now that's shortened into 6 short lecture videos that they're supposed to watch before the Zoom. That averages out to about 6 per week, and I have a goal of trying to keep them around 6 minutes. We reduced the number of lab assignments. Nate will talk about the labs. And then I used to do some really fun in-class activities where students played around with real maps, and I even printed off GIS layers on transparencies, which my colleagues thought I was crazy when I started doing that. They were like, "Aren't you supposed to be really young as an assistant professor, and why are you using transparencies?" But I really like having students do kind of manual GIS overlays. That's now to some extent gone away because now I can't have these kind of hands-on types of situations. So we're doing synchronous Zoom sessions where students find maps online and do work in Google Sheets and Google Docs. Next slide. The only difference for future asynchronous courses is that the synchronous Zoom sessions will be changed to, next slide, discussion board groups where students find and pull apart real maps. So that last section is really the only difference. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nate, who's going to talk about the labs.
Great, thank you. So yeah, like Carolyn said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the lab section. I taught this GIS 481 course last fall, or I was a TA last fall in 2019. And on the left-hand side, we had this lovely GIS lab that I could walk around to each person's desk and troubleshoot all their lab questions with them. Unfortunately, we now have to transition to Nate's home office at zoom.nateshouse.com. And obviously there are some limitations to this, but I'll be talking a little bit about how I helped revamp the course and get it situated for online learning. I was the sole instructor of this course over the past summer for the 481 Intro to GIS course. Usually the class is 16 weeks long, or rather it's usually 10 weeks long, and it was an accelerated 8-week course. This was my first time teaching at all as a sole instructor, as both being the lecturer as well as the lab instructor. It was also the first time the course had ever been offered completely 100% online. And I was really tasked with making this course as accessible as possible. This was a challenge not just because we were in the midst of a global pandemic and civil and social unrest in our country, but also GIS is really hard and it's difficult to teach when you don't have the in-person nature, and I can't just run over to people and help them with their questions. So I'm going to walk through briefly the course outline that I had for the summer class, and then I'm going to talk about the labs and how I went about transitioning those. I first offered an online ebook. It's called Essentials of Geographic Information Systems. It is a fantastic book if you're a first-time sole instructor. It helped inform my lecture slides so that I didn't feel like I was just making up GIS that I had learned a long time ago, and I can sort of corroborate with some outside source. And it was also free and made it really accessible for students who wanted something a little bit more supplemental to my lectures and the labs. I gave 2 live lectures each week. Just like Carolyn said, we had a lot of in-person hands-on activities, and I had to find a way to transition these to an online platform. So I used my iPad and my Apple Pencil to create sort of creative ways to visualize vector overlays and walk through raster analysis operations. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of awkward silences most of the time, but hopefully students got something a little extra out of it. We also had one lab section each week. It was an hour and a half, and I didn't walk through labs in this session. I really just answered questions as they were going through their lab assignments. And the reason I actually didn't walk through them is because all 6 of our lab assignments were pre-recorded by myself and posted on a YouTube page where students can just go and watch the video and walk through the assignment completely on their own. The YouTube page has a series of now lecture videos as well as the lab videos with both the videos in Arc Pro and the audio of me walking through the labs themselves. We sectioned out the YouTube page so that in the playlists section, there's a solely dedicated playlist for each lab, and they can walk through a first introductory video, kind of briefing them on what the lab is about, and then also they can go through the subsequent steps. One really nice part about having these as YouTube videos is that you can embed them into Canvas or whatever site you're using to host all of your assignments. And YouTube automatically generates closed captions. So instead of me having to type up all of my closed captions, they're automatically generated. They're not the best. They're really good, don't get me wrong, but you might have to tweak them here and there, and you can actually edit them yourself. But for a very quick 8-week course where I needed to turn over videos every single week, this was a really fantastic option. I really have to give a shout out to Nicholas Malloy and Amy Rock at Humboldt State, because before this course, maybe 2 weeks before I was teaching the course, I asked them for some advice, and I was very lucky to get some help about the YouTube page setup, and I have them to thank immensely. My process for recording the videos was just using QuickTime to record my video first, and then I recorded my audio over it. I have this lovely Snowball microphone, which made the audio quality really, really good. I'm using it right now, and I love it. And then I would splice and sort of edit the videos together in Adobe Premiere Pro. This is my first time ever using the software, and it is a little complicated, but it's nice because you can just pull in the audio files as well as the video files and start to splice them together. I spent hours meticulously cutting out the uhs and ums and all the sort of blank space in my audio. It was well worth it, and there's certainly some mistakes in the videos. I can't really bear to listen to my own voice, so I haven't gone back and gone them all over, but it was a really fun process, and I really enjoyed getting to know Adobe Premiere Pro. I also have to give a really big shout out to Grace Montague in the geography department. She's the undergrad student worker, and I literally could not have pulled this off without her help, because I would just send her all the video and audio files. I taught her how to splice the videos together, and she would make these YouTube videos and put them up on the page, and I absolutely couldn't have done it without her help. I additionally had 5 partner review lab assignments. Since this was typically an in-person course, I wanted to have some way for students to interact with their peers. So after they would complete the lab assignment, I would have them partner up with someone. I would randomly assign them a partner, and they would have to meet over Zoom and go over their answers together and see how they differed or how they were similar. I didn't do this so that I didn't have to grade assignments. In fact, it was actually really helpful and beneficial that they could talk to another peer and figure out, if they got the answer wrong, why did they get it wrong? How could they learn from it? I wouldn't necessarily advise this for an 8-week course. It ended up being a lot more work than I was up for, but I thought it was a really good way for students to interact with each other and also get some additional learning after they had turned in the assignment already. I also had 2 open book reflective exams rather than having a typical exam where they had to memorize something for just a short 30-minute period. I had them have a little bit longer answers and to reflect on how they would incorporate GIS in real-world applications. My key takeaways from this is that the post-processing in Adobe Premiere takes a long time. So definitely set aside a couple days for each. I would set a few days aside for each lab video. I really recommend writing a script for your videos. Make things accessible by having free ebooks, record your labs and lectures. Make sure you have a good microphone. This one was just about $50 and it was well worth it. I also recommend titling your lab videos not lab 1, 2, and 3, just in case you need to switch them around. And also be kind, forgiving, and flexible with your students. 3 of my students contracted COVID throughout the summer, and it was really difficult for them mostly, but also I really had to extend as many deadlines as possible. And lastly, lock your cat out when you're recording, or else this will happen. Well, hello. Do you want to join me in my recording? Say hello. Oh, how are you? You can stay here for a second. I'm going to redo this whole Thank you all so much. Definitely go onto the Slack community Cardo educators if you have any tips or advice for teaching GIS courses for online learning. And thank you all so much.
We have a question from Isaac Basora Villadarga. The question is for Dr. Fish. Why Arc Pro and not some other open source GIS like QGIS?
Yeah, it's a bunch of things. One, this is a first in a series of courses that we teach, and all of them rely on Esri software, or at least the first start of them rely on Esri software, and then they get into more advanced software and more open source stuff later on. My advanced course, I let them use whatever they want to use. And then part of that has to do with if this is really like an ask from the students, continuously, they really express that they want to learn Esri products, and that's because that's kind of what they've been told. And students have actually even been disappointed when I didn't, that they were concerned that Arc Pro, for instance, wasn't the right software, that they were told they really needed to learn ArcMap, and obviously that's not really correct. But we're really trying to lean towards what the students ask for in that case. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question.